Alright, we're getting ready to dig back into the unlimited diesel Ford truck here. Got it put back in a bay today and gonna start working on doing engine mounts, and need to put a track bar in it and do a front brace yet. So kind of a jigsaw puzzle, trying to figure out what order to do everything in. Need to get the engine set in there to make sure that we don't have interference with anything, and then I probably need to pull it back out so that I can actually work on stuff. So it'll be a couple days of kind of figuring things out, and probably not making just a ton of progress, but we'll get there, trying to get the front end wrapped up so we can cut the back end off and get started on the back half here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. So we changed gears a little bit here on the Ford project. Got the engine in yesterday, started looking at some stuff, and Nate and I were talking, and instead of going with more of a traditional engine mount setup, we're going to go with a mid-plate setup. That requires pulling the engine back out, and I'm going to temporarily weld some pieces to the existing mid-plate as kind of a template. It's going to be our temporary mid-plate, I guess you would say. So I'll be able to get everything all mounted up and get everything hanging there, and then once we have the truck all finished and once it goes back to the guys at Unlimited, they're going to take that and use it as a template to make a one-piece mid-plate slash adapter plate. So a little bit of a change of gears, but I think ultimately it's going to be better because of where it puts load on the frame, and it's a lot more centered on the weight of the engine and transmission. So a little bit more work on the front end, but in the back end I think it's going to be a lot better. It's also going to open up some more space for doing the steering shaft. I was going to have to really fight the steering shaft with the engine mount stuff. So we'll get this thing out and get some mid-plate stuff welded onto it and stuff it back in, and see how it turns out. So we're slowly making some progress here on the Unlimited truck. Spent the last couple days getting the engine set. We decided to go with mid-plate design. So got tabs and stuff welded onto the existing mid-plate and got all of that stuff welded in. So the engine and the drivetrain is in the truck, and so next steps is getting steering shaft in. Got some of those parts showing up here in the next couple of days, and then also working on getting a track bar. So just knocking one thing out at a time, getting close to having the front end finished so we can get started on the cage and the back half. Alright, so the Ford looks a little bit different from the last time you guys saw it. Connor ran away from us for a few days, so we're missing some footage, but no, that's alright. We cut the back of the Ford here. I don't know if you guys remember that Diesel Brothers episode a while back where they made the rollover truck. That's what we're doing here. We're making a rollover truck. So really short wheel. Wait, just kidding. Not really. We are doing a back half, full back half on this tubular. So we've got the back cut off. We've got the frame boxed in and working on getting 4-link brackets on the axle. I'm going to do a few things a little bit different on this one. I'm going to end up doing a wishbone to locate the back axle instead of just the regular track bar, and then going to try a little bit of a different anti-roll bar, and just a few things a little different from some of the other trucks that we've done. So just kind of follow along as we go here, and hopefully this thing will turn out pretty cool. I'm working on making a support bar here. This is going to be for my mount point for the wishbone. So the wishbone needs a center mount point on the axle. So instead of welding to the cast and trusting that, I'm bending up this piece of Docol. That way we can weld directly to the axle tubes and then mount the tab to that. So this will get flipped upside down, and then this will all sit up underneath the drivetrain. Just kind of doing this, trying to clean things up a little bit. It seems like we always have a lot of things fighting for space here on the axle tubes. So this should help that a little bit versus when we do the traditional track bar. So I've got the front 4-link brackets welded together for the Ford, and I'm starting to work on the wishbone here. Pretty much the center part of the wishbone here is kind of where I'm starting. You have a slider bar so that the wishbone doesn't, pretty much the only job of the wishbone is to locate the axle side to side. And you want to make sure that it doesn't put any load on the axle other than that. So you need to make sure that you have a good slider in the middle. I've got 1.5 inch 120 wall for my inner pipe, and then I've got 1 3/4 120 wall for my outer pipe. So I've got a pretty good snug fit, but yet I have, you know, really good free in and out and rotation of movement, so that if the axle needs to articulate or move in and out as the suspension goes up and down, it can do that. So this is kind of the center part of it. Then we'll have 2 mount points up on the front bar there, and then I'll kind of make a Y bars coming in here with a support, just to try to make that really good and sturdy so that we don't get any side-to-side flex. So then there'll be heim joints here and here, so then you can adjust those as well, and you can move the axle side to side a little bit with that if it's not quite centered up or whatever you need to do. It gives you some adjustment up in there. So Wishbone's not super picky on where it's mounted either. This one I'm putting on the underside of the axle because it just is kind of going to be down and out of the way that way. You can mount them on top of the axle, you can mount them under the axle. You can even go as far as flipping it around and put a single mount point up front and 2 in the back. That makes it easier sometimes, like to get around the pumpkin and stuff. But the only downside I see to that is if you at all putting rear steer. We ran into this on the S10. I have that one in backwards to where there's 2 mount points on the axle and 1 on the frame. But when you put rear steer in that, which is when you lengthen the one side of your 4-link bars longer than the other to try to make the truck go straight and compensate for the engine torque and stuff, it actually ends up shifting your axle side to side when you do that, because you have 2 solid mount points on the axle. So then you're adjusting your wishbone every time that you're adjusting rear steer. So that's the one disadvantage of doing it this way. So I prefer to do it this way. It's just a lot easier when you have 2 mount points up on the truck versus 2 on the axle. So on Friday we got the 4-link finished up and got the wishbone done and got everything put together and set in place. We got the length of we got the axle set in place, pretty much the correct distance from the cab. So then today I got started on getting the main frame or main hoop put in. Decided to go with kind of a 1-piece single bar design. Yeah, really at this point it's just a matter of getting everything squared up and making sure that everything's true before we start welding stuff in. And once I get this main part in, we can start reinforcing things and going from there.
So today we're just getting some of the finished welding done that we had, and we actually are doing the cage right now. We're going to do the main hoop and, you know, everything that goes involved with that. So then we can finish the back half and just finish everything with the truck. So hopefully here today we'll have the main hoop in, and yeah.
Making pretty good headways. We got the main structure of it put in and tacked everything in place, and this morning we ended up dropping the cage down and we got all of our topside welds done. So now that we have all the topside welds done, we put the cage back up in place and we're finishing up some of the other bars we just got done. We're just finishing up welding in the dash bar, and then after that we'll go ahead and put the door bars in and get the outriggers on, and then we just need to do a little bit of triangulation in the back end of it to stiffen up the back of the chassis. So we're finally getting down to the end of our project here on the step-side Ford Lightning. Spent the last couple of days just adding some bracing here and there. Today we're working on getting the seats mounted. We got the door bars finished out in the roll cage, so just doing seats and have some steering linkage stuff I'm still finishing up. Still waiting for a steering wheel and a few small parts like that. But I think by the end of the day today we should be pretty much ready to mount the bed, and once that's done I think we're pretty much done. Joe Lease is hopefully going to come down tomorrow and get us a cage cert for this truck and for Stuart Ingram's truck, so hopefully be ready to go later this week. Alright, we're pretty much done here with Nate Baylor's truck. Just thought I would recap a little bit of everything that we did on it. This project, I started talking to Nate about it last year around PRI time, and first it was going to be a back half and an 850 cage kind of thing, and then we started talking about also maybe doing a four-wheel drive conversion on it. So it kind of grew as we kept talking, and neither one of us were totally sure what we were getting ourselves into when we started, but he brought the truck to us this spring and brought us some axles out of a newer Power Stroke, and decided to go ahead with doing the four-wheel drive. So it started out with doing a front half on the truck, which is what it took to put the straight front axle in it. It used to have like the old, I don't know what you call them, I-beam style front end, and so we ended up cutting the front of the frame off, completely rebuilt it, and did brackets for the control arms to hold the axle, and then getting everything fit. At first I was kind of concerned that we'd be able to get the truck low enough and be able to get the straight axle underneath the engine, but ended up getting all of that figured out. I'm really happy with how the front turned out. We did a rack and pinion steering on the front axle. So we mount a power rack and pinion from a third-gen two-wheel drive Dodge to it, so that gives us power steering, and the control of a rack and pinion just seems to be a whole lot tighter than what a crossover steering does. So mounting the rack on the axle is fairly simple. Probably the most difficult part was getting the steering shaft run up through, getting it clear of all the engine mounts and the frame and the engine and everything, but got everything fit in there real nice, and the steering seems to be really tight, so really happy with that. We did most of the front end we did this spring when we had it scheduled in at first, and the project turned into be a lot bigger than what we had scheduled for, so we ended up storing the truck for a few months in one of our front buildings, and we pulled it back in here I think about a month ago, and ended up finishing it out. So then we ended up mounting the engine, doing a mid plate, and ended up also doing some front engine supports. So should make, the goal with doing that was to make so that the engine can come in and out of the truck through the front fairly easily. We also put disconnects in the front frame so that the engine can come straight forward. Since we have a cage in it, we can't lift the cab to do typical Ford things. So most everything's going to have to come out the front instead of going out the top. Once the front end was done, we ended up cutting the back end of it off and did a complete back half in dough and did a 4-link kit there as well. Really happy with how that all turned out. This is one of the first big projects that we used a lot of dough tube on. Some of the reason for that is what steel prices have done recently. I've known dough was around for a while, and I really liked the product, but it wasn't cost effective. It was considerably more than what chromoly was, but now with steel prices the way they are, it's very comparable, and even at times, depending on what the market's doing, is actually cheaper than what chromoly is. The things that I like about dough, for one, it's a lot nicer looking pipe. It has a really nice shiny finish to it, It doesn't have a mill scale on it that we have to machine off or have to grind off when we're doing welding, and it also doesn't heat harden like chromoly does. So that really makes it stronger in the weld areas than what chromoly would be. So it's a really nice product to work with. Then we also did the 850 cage with the dough call as well. So the cage in the truck is a fairly straightforward 850 cage. We just got it certified the other day, so everything's good to go there. We put 2 Kirky seats in it, and we also did a race style steering column. Has a really nice adjustable steering column setup in it from Sweet Manufacturing with a removable Grant steering wheel. So that pretty much wraps up what we've done to the truck. We were really happy with it when we put it on the scales the other day. We put all of the factory body panels back on the truck, so it has the factory beds shell on it. It doesn't have the box in it anymore, but it still has a functioning tailgate and all of the factory bed panels. And then we're still going to put a bed cover on it, just do a nice lightweight aluminum cover to cover everything up real nice and make it look more like a street truck. So aside from the bars coming out of the back window, you really won't be able to tell what's underneath the truck, and we're hoping that it should be a really nice truck, whether he wants to do some grudge racing with it. I know he's hoping to run 590 with it in ODSS and also do some dirt bags with it. But when we had it on the scales the other day, it weighed 3,670 pounds, so we were really happy with that. We're guessing they're probably going to end up adding another 1,000 pounds by the time they get the turbos and the fluids and drive shafts and a driver and all that kind of stuff in it. But I would say they have a really legit shot at having a sub 5,000 pound vehicle. And for a 4-wheel drive vehicle with all of the factory body panels on it and no fiberglass, that's really impressive. So really happy with how the project turned out. Hope Nate Baylor and the guys over at Unlimited have a lot of fun with it. And now that we have a really nice chassis for them, hopefully the Ford guys can keep up their end of the bargain and make the horsepower that they need to make this truck go fast. But no, they do a lot of really cool work. It's just always fun ribbing on the Ford guys a little bit. But the plan is to make about 1,300 horsepower with it, and if they can do that, it should be a fun truck that'll go rounds in 590 and do a little bit of anything else they want to do with it.